Hi everyone, I'm Kelly, and in today's video we're going to talk about hiking in Washington. I'll be giving you a beginner's guide to hiking in Washington and also 25 hiking recommendations. So I've lived in Seattle, Washington for almost 3 years now, and a big reason why I wanted to move here and why I still love living here is because of all the hiking that you can do. There are just so many hikes available, so many different views that you can get from hiking, and just like various difficulty levels too. So I hope that this video will maybe help you, a beginner, go on your first hike, or if you already have been hiking before, maybe you can discover a new hike that you want to do this season. Or maybe if you're visiting from out of town and you want to spend a day in the city and a day out in nature, I hope that this can give you a good hiking recommendation so you can see the beautiful Pacific Northwest. So in this video, we'll talk about the different hiking conditions per season and what you can expect. We'll go over the list of 25 hiking recommendations that I have for you. I'll give you some recommendations on where you can also find some hikes outside of this video. We'll go over where to find hikes and how to find all the information you need, how to find the current conditions for the hikes, how to pick a hike, the different parking permits, what to bring hiking, and also the leave no trace principles, which is really important for hiking, camping, backpacking, basically anything you do out in the wilderness. So let's start with the hiking conditions for each season. So let's start with spring. I love hiking in the spring because the weather is a lot cooler. Even though there is a higher chance of rain, the rain does help with keeping the ground more compact, and when you're hiking on the trail, it's not as dusty. Hiking by the rivers or waterfalls are really nice during spring, especially if the snow is starting to melt, because those waterfalls and rivers will have a lot more water flow in them. A couple other things that you should consider if you go hiking in spring is there might be some down trees, or the trail conditions might not be as good yet. Another thing you'll want to look out for is if there's still snow. Mostly during spring, it doesn't get warm enough that the snow completely melts yet, so you'll want to make sure you have gaiters or microspikes if you're going to be hiking through snow. Summer in Seattle is amazing. As many of you know, everybody loves summer in Seattle. You have really long days. You have a chance of seeing wildflowers during your hike. You have way more hikes available because most of the snow is melted. And you also have a better chance of having a clear day during the summer. But something that you should consider is that trails can be a lot busier. Parking lots will be a lot busier. The weather can be a lot warmer. And since there isn't as much rain, the trails can be a lot dustier too. So just keep that in mind when hiking in the summer. Fall is one of my favorite seasons to hike in because the weather is cooler. You still have the long sunny days. At least in the first half of fall, you have a lot of clear days still, and it's not as cold yet. Fall is also beautiful because you have the fall foliage. The larches start turning their bright yellow color. It's not as busy because the crowds of summer have died down, but something that you should keep an eye out on is, of course, the weather and if there is a chance of snow coming up. So even though winter snows and is very gray and has a high chance of rain, you still can go hiking here in Washington. So you can go snowshoeing in the winter, which is really fun. You can rent snowshoes from REI, or you can buy your own set of snowshoes. But if you do go hiking in the snow or snowshoeing, you just want to make sure you check for any avalanche warnings or just any weather conditions. If there is any new snowfall, just be aware that the trail might not be as easy to find. So make sure you read up on the trail and are just prepared to navigate through there. So also in the winter, there's a high chance of rain, fog, snow. So just be aware of those conditions and set your expectations correctly. If you are going on a hike where normally in the summer you would see mountain views or lakes or something like that out in the distance, just know that you might not see that in the winter. So even though the hiking conditions do vary each season, something that is pretty cool is that if you do the same hike, but in the different seasons, you'll experience something different every time. So now we'll go over 25 hikes that you can do here in Washington. So first on the list is Rattlesnake Ledge. It is a classic Washington hike. It's about an hour away from Seattle. So if you are visiting from out of town, I feel like this is a hike that is good to do because you'll see the view of Rattlesnake Lake. You'll see the view of the valley and the mountains with all the evergreen trees. It is just a classic Washington hike. So next on the list is Snoqualmie Falls, and this is also another classic Washington spot to go to. There is a hike there, which I haven't done, so I'm only going to speak for or basically like the touristy part of it. You have the parking lot, there's a bridge that crosses over the street, and then a paved path where you're overlooking the waterfall. So that is definitely very easy, family friendly. But something that you should consider is that if you go on a day where there is some fog, or if you go like early in the morning, there's a chance that you might not see the waterfall. And that happened to our friends, and they just took a picture and it was just this gray blob of fog. The next two on the list are fire lookout hikes. So I have Heybrook Lookout, where you go on this super high rock and you get this beautiful view of Mount Rainier. And if it is clear enough, you'll see Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, and Mount Hood in the distance. This one is a little bit sketch in a way. The lookout is on a super high rock and it has a pretty steep drop off. So just make sure if you go with young kids or with your dogs, just to keep an eye on them and not go too close to the edge. So the next hike on the list is Heybrook Lookout, which is about 2 hours away from Seattle. It's another fire lookout hike where if you go up and it's a clear day, you can see Mount Index, which is a really beautiful peak. So I have two hikes. They technically could be split into 5 hikes, but I'm counting them as 2. The first one is Rachel Lake, Lila Lake, and Alta Mountain. These could all be separated into their own hikes, but my friends and I did that all in one trip, so I'm just counting it as one. This is definitely a difficult hike. You get views of these super clear lakes just surrounded by mountains, and if you go to the top of Alta Mountain, which we didn't exactly go to the top of, you can see Mount Rainier and just all the swooping views of the area. The next on the list is Tuck and Robin Lakes, which could also be split into 2 hikes, but my husband and I did this in one go, so I'm counting it as one hike. But this was one of my all-time favorite hikes. It is so beautiful because we went in the fall, so we had the fall foliage, we had the alpine lakes, and then we also had just these big granite rocks that were there on the mountain. This is definitely one of the most difficult hikes that I've ever done. And we did it with backpacks, which probably made it even tougher, but the elevation gain here is not a joke. Definitely a tough one, but it was so worth it. The next 3 hikes that I have for you are all waterfall hikes. So the first is Wallace Falls, and I'd say this is easy to moderate because there's the lower falls, the middle falls, and the upper falls. So it's up to you how far you want to go and how difficult you want to make your hike, because obviously the more that you do, the more difficult it does get. And it's a nice hike to do even if it's going to be like cloudy or rainy, because you are so close to the waterfall that the fog or the rain wouldn't ruin the view. The next waterfall hike is Franklin Falls, which is another beautiful waterfall hike. It's pretty close to Seattle and also a relatively short hike. I'd say this is also one that you could do with family, but just be careful closer to the waterfall because the trail gets pretty narrow and you're kind of like walking across some rocks, and you're closer to the waterfall, so they can be a little bit slippery just because they're more wet. So the last waterfall hike recommendation that I have is Teneriffe Falls, and one note that I have is that you should go during the spring once the snow is melting, because that's where the water flow will be a lot bigger and the waterfall will look way cooler. The first time I did this hike, it was in the spring and it was so beautiful. And then I recommended to go there with my sister and her friends in the summer, like in the middle of July. And when we got there, the water flow was just not it. It didn't even really look like a waterfall. So definitely go there in the spring once the snow is melting. Now I have a couple of hikes that are less than an hour away from Seattle and ranging in difficulty. So if you want a hike that is pretty close to Seattle and difficult, like you get a good workout, I would recommend doing Mount Si. That one is really fun, and at the end you scramble up some rocks and you can go up to the top, and then if it's clear you can see Mount Rainier. And then another one that is close by but also definitely a workout is Mailbox Peak. There are just these huge rocks towards the end of the trail that takes you up to the top of the mountain and to the mailbox that is at the top of the peak. I don't know exactly what that view is because when we went it was during the spring and it was just completely covered in fog, but I still enjoyed the hike. And then a moderate hike that is probably about 30 minutes away, maybe even less, from Seattle is Poo Poo Point. And that one is really cool because once you do get to the top, that's actually like a launching pad for the paragliders that paraglide around there, and you overlook Issaquah, and then you can see Lake Washington in the distance, which is really cool. And then a few easy hikes, maybe even considered walks around here in Seattle. They're just like in the greater Seattle area. The first is Discovery Park, which is a huge park in Seattle, like in the city Seattle. If you go to the lighthouse, you can see the views of Puget Sound, and you can see Mount Rainier if it's clear enough. Discovery Park is really nice and family friendly, and if you just want a break from the city, it's a great place to go to walk your dogs or just go on a walk with your family and friends. The next one is St. Edward State Park. I don't have a specific trail in there, but there are trails that go towards Lake Washington, and when Anthony and I went with Manny, our dog, we saw lots of families enjoying their time there too. Another similar one is Bridle Trail State Park, which is also super close to Seattle. So the trail that we went on here is also accessible to horses, so you might see a few horses on the trail. And then the last kind of easy local hiking that you can do is Lord Hill Park near Monroe. If you go during June, you'll have a chance of seeing some wildflowers, which is so beautiful. Another good one to just kind of get out in nature, and one that Anthony and I went on just to kind of walk with Manny. We didn't go out in full hiking gear, but it was definitely a nice little walk. So the next few hikes I have on the list kind of help show the unique and diverse views that you can get from hiking here in Washington. So the first is Big Four Ice Caves, which is a pretty easy hike, not much elevation gain. You basically go to the base of this one mountain where all this snow collects and creates this ice cave. Something that you should be careful of though is to not go into the ice cave, because you never know when the ice and the snow will fall, and so it could be pretty dangerous. And there is a memorial there of someone who had passed away from the ice cave, so just be careful. The next is Lake Serene, which we went on recently. It is at the base of Mount Index, and it is so pretty. I can't wait to go back once all the snow has melted, because when we went, the lake was covered in snow. But something that was pretty cool from when we went, when there was still snow on Mount Index, is the snow was starting to melt. So sometimes you'd hear just this like crashing, and it would be this like mini avalanche of snow just falling down between the cracks of the mountain. The next is Heybrook Ridge, which is another pretty easy hike where you get a view of Mount Index. The next hike is Second Beach in Olympic National Park. This is a pretty easy hike where I believe it's less than 1 mile, and you get to go to the coast and see the ocean, and then you also see the haystacks, which are basically those big rock formations out in the water. And then the next hike is North Beach in Deception Pass State Park. This one is pretty cool because if it's clear, you can see the San Juan Islands out in the distance. You can see the view of the iconic Deception Pass Bridge. Another pretty unique hike to do is the Hoh River Trail in Olympic National Park. Basically, you go through the Hoh rainforest. I would recommend going here just because going through the rainforest is so crazy. It's so green and so beautiful. This trail is really long, so you can try just hiking to one point, like 5 Mile Island. Taking a break there, you get to see a view of the river, and then you can just hike back. Nearing the end of the list, we have Chelan Butte Trail. This was a good one that we did in the spring last year, where there was still a lot of hikes that had a lot of snow in them. But since this trail is so exposed, most of it was not covered in snow. But once we got to the top, there was still some snow, but not too bad to deal with. Something to note is that this trail is not in the mountains where there are a lot of trees, so you get a lot of sun exposure. So if you go when it's warmer, just make sure you have enough water, enough sun protection. And then the last two that I have are some good seasonal hikes. Maple Pass Loop Trail is a beautiful trail up near North Cascades National Park. It's a really good one where you can see the larches, you get the mountain views, you get the mountain lakes. It's just such a good trail overall. And then the last hike recommendation that I have is Skyline Lake, which is right by Stevens Pass, about 2 hours or so away from Seattle. This is a really good snowshoeing trail that I've done a couple of times. The difficulty, I'd say, is pretty moderate in the beginning. The elevation gain can be pretty tough, but the views are so worth it, especially if it's clear enough. You can see the Stevens Pass ski resort and then just all of the peaks nearby. Some of the best ways to find hikes are obviously through photos, and so if you find a photo that you want to see, save it, try and figure out if there's a link to the hike or if they tag the location of the hike. Another good way to discover some hikes are by looking at guidebooks, and you can get those from any bookstore. Recently, I got a book of hikes here in Washington from Goodwill, so that's another way to discover hikes. Another way that you can discover some really great hikes in Washington is through my friend Michelle's blog, The Wandering Queen. She posts so many good hikes, different seasonal posts. She helps give you ideas on gear, what to bring, how to prepare, so definitely check her blog out. And then 2 really great resources for discovering hikes and also just finding information on hikes is the Washington Trails Association, also known as WTA. They give a lot of information on hikes specifically in Washington. And then also All Trails, which is helpful, not just specific to Washington, but for just hiking in general in pretty much all around the world. Something that is really important to do when you are researching a hike to do is to see what the current conditions are. What really helps, at least for me when I'm hiking in Washington, is looking at trip reports on WTA. So I can see any information that people might have on how the road is, or if there are any washouts, or in one of the hikes that we did, somebody had posted that there was like a wasp's nest at a certain point in the hike. So it's just good to see recent information on the hike so you know what to expect. Another good website that I use to check the weather and current conditions or upcoming conditions is windy.com, where you can see what the expected rainfall is from certain times of day, if there's any expected snow, or even just like the wind in general. Now we'll go over how to pick a hike. I gave you a list. Maybe you have your eye on a couple of hikes, but you want to know which one you should do first. And what you should consider are the distance of the hike, the elevation gain, and then the distance from you, basically, because ultimately all those things will factor into how long the hike will take. So when you look at WTA, at least, they'll give you the length of the hike or the distance of the hike. So that's like the round trip mileage, basically. And then another metric you'll want to look at is the elevation gain, which is basically how much of an incline you will do. One thing that you should note though is that even though a hike might seem really short, make sure you look at the elevation gain, because if you have a short hike but the elevation gain is a lot, then basically you'll be gaining a lot of elevation in a short amount of time, meaning the hike will be very steep and tiring. Something else that also helps is if you look at the terrain version of Google Maps, so you can see where the elevation gain is on the hike. And then for planning purposes, usually I give basically the whole day for hiking. Wake up early to drive to the trailhead and then starting the hike in the morning, basically. When we have a day where we do go on a hike, usually I don't make any plans until maybe dinner or no plans at all afterwards, just because you don't know exactly how long the hike will take. Maybe you'll want to spend your time there, enjoy the view, or maybe you might get injured, so the hike might take a little bit longer. But it is definitely doable to go hiking and then do something later in the day too, especially if the hike is a lot closer to where you're located. Now we'll go over a few of the parking permits. So the first is the Discover Pass, which works at most Washington state parks, and then the Northwest Forest Pass, and then the National Park Pass, which is for all of the national parks. So make sure when you look into what hike you want to do that you'll have the correct parking pass. Most of these do allow you to buy just day passes, so you don't have to buy an annual pass. If you look at WTA and check the hikes there, it'll say what parking permits needed, if one is even needed at all. And if you are visiting Seattle, visiting from out of town, or maybe you live in Seattle, something that does help is if you rent a gig car, they come with a Discover Pass. So if you want to rent one for the whole day and use that to take it to the hike, you definitely can do that. Now, what to bring when you are hiking. So this is what we usually bring. I'll bring my backpack, I'll bring my water, usually just this water bottle, or I'll bring like a Smart water bottle. That water bottle is really nice because our water filter just fits perfectly in there. If we're going on a hike that is a lot longer, and we know that there is a water source, then we will bring a water filter just in case if we want to have more. But in general, just the water in the water bottles is enough for a day hike. Usually we'll bring snacks, so like almonds or a granola bar. Something that is really nice and rewarding is if you bring like a sandwich. So if you hike in the morning and then once you get to the top, you can just enjoy your lunch with a view. You'll want to bring some sort of first aid kit just in case you get injured. And then you'll want to bring some sort of navigation system. Usually what I'll do is I'll take screenshots of the map of the trail on All Trails or WTA, and I'll take screenshots of the trail description where it says like, when you hit this river, make sure you stay right, and then you'll go up some switchbacks, things like that. And then I'll also download an offline map of the area that we'll be hiking in, just in case I need to pull that up. For a lot of these hikes that I mentioned here, they are mostly day hiking areas, so they are pretty well maintained. They're pretty popular hikes, so usually I'll see people on the trail when I'm hiking there, and the trails are all really well marked too. And then some dog specific stuff that we bring. We bring Manny's bowl for water. We have this like collapsible bowl and it has a clip on it, so we can just clip it on the outside of our bags. We bring a separate water bottle for Manny just so he has enough water and we have enough water. And then also plenty of dog bags. Manny will poop at least once on the trail, sometimes twice on the trail. So when he does go poop on the trail, we will bring his poop with us in our bag. So a lot of the times we will double bag or sometimes even triple bag it so that it doesn't smell as much. And then we bring like an empty almond container and then just put his poop in there just so it doesn't smell as much. And then we can just stick that on the outside of our bag so it's like completely separate from the rest of the stuff that's in my bag. And then if you want to see what you should wear when you go hiking, I have a whole separate video on that, so you should definitely check that out. And then lastly, we can go over the Leave No Trace principles, which is basically to help us as humans maintain these trails. These are all principles that are defined in the Leave No Trace website, and I'll link that in the description box below if you want to read more on it. The first is plan ahead and prepare. So basically, you'll want to read as much as you can on the trail, know where you're going, and trust me, the worst feeling is to go on a trail and not know what to expect. Definitely read as much as you can on the trail. Everybody in the group should be aware of what you're doing and what's happening. And then also you want to prepare for anything that could happen, any unexpected thing that could happen on the trail, and also just prepare for the weather too. The next principle is to travel and camp on durable surfaces. I know it can be tempting, especially on the trails with switchbacks, to cut corners, but make sure you just stay on the trail to help maintain the wildlife and everything that is off the trail. And then you'll want to dispose of your waste properly. So like I mentioned, we bring our dog poop in and out. We don't leave it on the side of the trail and then pick it up later, just because there's a chance that your poop bag could get knocked over, or you forget to pick it up, or an animal somehow takes it and now it's just in the wild. So you want to make sure that you pack all of your trash with you and then throw it away once you're done. Something else that you should read up on is about how to go to the bathroom in the wilderness. Some trailheads have restrooms and some don't. So if you are going on a long hike or you drink a lot of water, just make sure you know the best practices for going out in the wilderness. So the fourth is leave what you find. Again, we want to keep these places beautiful. We don't want to ruin the ecosystem that they have going on there. Number 5 is minimize campfire impacts, not as applicable to day hiking, but good to know for backpacking and camping. The 6th is to respect wildlife. So that's, the birds that you might see. You could see mountain goats, you could see bears. We haven't seen any bears on trail yet, but if you do see any kind of wildlife, make sure you just let them be. Admire them from afar. Don't try to feed them or lure them over. Basically, you want to do that for your safety, obviously, for everyone else's safety on the trail, and for the animal's safety as well. If you are curious on bear safety and hiking in bear territory, definitely look into that. There are a lot of best practices out there. And then lastly, be considerate of others. You want to make sure that everybody who is on the trail can enjoy their time on the trail. Some trail etiquette is to basically let the people who are going up the trail pass. I found that this isn't always the case though, because sometimes it's just easier for the people who are going down to step aside on the side of the trail than the people going up. But in general, just a good rule of thumb is to let the people who are going up pass in front of you. And then if there are people behind you who might be walking faster than you, or there could even be trail runners on the trail, just be considerate of the people behind you and let them pass too if they are going at a faster speed. Okay, so that's pretty much it for my beginner's guide to hiking in Washington and 25 hiking recommendations for you. I hope you enjoyed this video and can get outside and start hiking. If you have already been hiking in the Washington area, I hope that you might have found a new hike that you might want to explore for your next hike. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have any other trail suggestions or tips for hiking in Washington, please leave that in the comments below, because the more information that we share, the better. If you like this video, also please consider subscribing to my YouTube channel. I post a lot of videos about our life here in Washington and all the different outdoor adventures that we do, and also the adventures that we do in the city. So definitely check those videos out and subscribe to my channel if you like those videos and want to see more. Thank you again for watching this video. I hope it helped you, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.